The lessons in the first module had to do with archetypes and the commonalities of symbols and stories that exist throughout the whole world in different cultures and different times. Now, there are different theories for the existence of archetypes, and you can pick whichever one that you think is most applicable, or you can even make up your own. Personally, I think it is a combination of several of these theories. I like Jung's idea, but there's absolutely no way it can be proven that these archetypes reside within our psyches. In addition to the symbols and the stories, as we begin to examine the mythoi, the commonalities in these mythoi, we'll also see that there are commonalities in the deities. Different cultures, religion, because we tend to associate certain religions and certain myth with certain cultures. So when we say Greek myth, we understand that the Greeks had in somewhat a standardized religion, but there were many variances within that. And those myths are the Greek myths. The same applies with the Norse, the Sumerians, the Egyptians, points in India and points in Asia, not just India, and points in the Americas. But as we move along, we see that these deities, even when we get into the monotheistic religions, tend to have the same attributes. And maybe, I can't say which came first, the chicken or the egg, the myths or the gods. But in this video, I want to discuss some of the aspects of deity, even though there are lessons that follow, and talk about some specifics and talk about some generalities. Now, generalities. When you examine the deities in various mythoi, you will see that usually the earth is associated with goddesses, and in some cases is the actual body of the goddess. We see this in Greek myth, and we will see this in other myth as well. But there are variants to that. In Egyptian myth, the earth is the body of a male, Geb, and the sky is a goddess, his wife, Nut. In Norse myth, we see that the earth is made out of the body of the frost giant Ymir, who's not a god per se, but certainly has godly attributes. And is also in Norse myth, we also see a variant because the moon is male and the sun is female. But in most other myth, the sun is associated with a male deity and the moon is associated with a female deity. This is we see this in Greek, we see this in Egyptian. However, in Sumerian myth, it is the moon god Nana is different from what we see. The ancients didn't have a problem with these variances, even if they knew that they existed. Modern humans tend to think in linear fashion. We have a problem with some of these. So those are some of the generalities of deities. What are some specifics? We see the Magna Mater, the Great Mother. We see male deities associated most often with mountains, again the sun, though there are variants to that, and thunder and lightning. Interestingly enough, nature is very often associated with females, but males, the storms are the province of the male, except for Inanna in Sumeria, and she is said to bring the thunder and the lightning. Jung talks about the archetype of the special child, and we see this repeated not only with deity but with mortals. Zeus is a special child. Mithra is a special child. Females, boy, the hero's myth, there are feminine heroine, that's not a word that we use anymore, myth. But most often, the quest of the hero is associated with males. There are quests of females, but they tend to differ from those of males, and even to more specifics. When we look at these aspects of the different deities, you see them repeated, and basically what we see are the deities from the early cultures evolving into the deities of the later cultures. And one that I want to mention again specifically, boy, I said that word about 5 times, is the figure of Inanna. Now, Inanna begins in Sumeria, and again, by the time these myths are written down, they've been around for a very long time, so I have no doubt that there are precursors to Inanna. But Inanna is a Sumerian goddess. She evolves into the Babylonian goddess Ishtar, and in Phoenicia she is known as Astarte. Now, Inanna makes a prototrip into the underworld, and in the Sumerian myth, it's not quite clear why Inanna goes into the underworld. We'll talk about this later. In other myths, for example, with Ishtar, she goes in search of her consort/husband, Tammuz. Astarte does the same. Later myths, Inanna, Ishtar, Astarte becomes rather fragmented, and the specifics here I'm going to mention are in Greek myth. Aphrodite, the goddess of love, is in direct descent from Inanna and Ishtar, who are also the goddesses of love. But in Greek myth, Demeter is also a direct descendant of Ishtar and Inanna. Because when Inanna and Ishtar descend into the underworld, the earth becomes barren. They are goddesses of fertility. Now, Demeter does not descend into the underworld, but her daughter Persephone does. And when Persephone descends, then Demeter mourns, and the earth experiences winter for the first time. So, fragmentation of more central characters into various cultures. I would be remiss if I did not mention Isis. Isis is a very old deity, and she is a counterpart of Inanna as well. Now, the Nile growing season is different from those that come after, and Isis does not, she mourns the loss of Osiris, and she goes in search for him, as does Inanna, Ishtar, Demeter go in search for loved ones, but she doesn't descend into the underworld in order to find him, nor does the earth really suffer because of that. Although the inundation of the Nile every spring is said to occur because of Inanna crying. So it almost has a reverse effect, because the Nile when it flooded, it would deposit silt, and that silt was very rich and organic. But Isis is definitely a very early counterpart of these other goddesses, and I'm going to post a poem, the hymn to Isis, that says, the poet actually says, she is known as this name in this country and this name in this country. We also see this reflected in Hindu myth, in Byerland's section on Hindu creation myths, where it is said that when you worship this god or this goddess, you are really worshiping Brahma. So all of these other deities are manifestations and faces of Brahma. So the poet who wrote the hymn to Isis said, all of these other goddesses are manifestations and aspects of Isis. They just have different names. Specifics of the male deities, storm gods. Now, we see that in Sumeria, Enlil is god of the air, and those provinces, the mountains, etc., would belong to him because they're light. They're not light, but they're airy. They reach towards the sky. In Greek myth, we of course have Zeus, who is the bearer of the thunderbolt, and he can zap you just like that. In Norse myth, we have Odin and Thor, who are both associated with storms, and of course, Thor does the same thing as does Zeus. He can zap you with his thunderbolt. We still see this carried over into Christianity, because I don't know if people say it so much anymore, but it was a very common saying that people would say, and if I'm lying, may God strike me with lightning. And when I was a kid, I was afraid to say that, because I was afraid if I said, may God strike me with lightning, I was going to be blown off the face of the earth. Even though Christians are the ones that are saying this, it comes directly from those storm gods, not thorn gods, storm gods, who would zap you if you were not doing what it is that you were supposed to be doing. Zeus might have used his thunderbolts a little unwisely at times, but Thor, I can't ever remember a time when Thor zapped a human. His zapping was mainly of ogres, evil frost giants, and other miscreants. So, when we look at these different myths and we see how similar they are, we will also see similarities of the deities. And there's one more that I will mention before I end. And again, we will talk about these in future modules, and we'll talk about a wider array or variety of deities. Again, the trip to the underworld. Osiris goes, Inanna goes, Ishtar goes, Persephone goes, Demeter doesn't go, but she mourns. Jesus goes. You also see this in Mesoamerica, and the divine twins are twins who go into the underworld in order to find their father. But I wanted to talk about the aspect of the twins rather than the descent. We see this commonality of twins or brothers, not so much with sisters, but twins or brothers who are very, very close. Now, sometimes they work together. The divine twins work together in the Mesoamerican myth. In other myths that we see, the twins don't always work together. For example, in Judaism, you have Esau and you have Jacob, and they don't work together. They start fighting each other in utero. In Greek myth, it's not so much the twins, though you do have brothers who are twins, but you have brothers. You also have very good friends, and they work together. But again, you have brothers or close friends who work against each other, and we'll read some of these in Ireland. I'm trying to think of goddesses and the sisters, and you do have the triple goddess aspect, but that's a little bit different from actual brothers or twins who work together. Okay, I think I'm going to stop now. And by the way, pay attention to me and not to him. He likes to sit on my lap, and boy, there's lots of myths about cats as well. I'm going to stop now.